So let's start with CNN's Dana Bash interviewing IDF international spokesperson Nadav Shoshani about the discovery of 6 bodies of hostages that Israel said was killed by Hamas in Gaza.
Here with me now is IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani. Thank you so much for being here. We are so incredibly devastated for Israel, for all of the families. It's just hard to even imagine how much pain everybody is in. And
so that's great. I think it's really important to have empathy. The problem is I've never seen Dana Bash express anything close to this amount of empathy and upset for the thousands of Palestinians who have been killed.
Yeah, remember early on when she was interviewing Pramila Jayapal, and Pramila Jayapal said that, Israel's killed. At that point, it was over like 14,000 civilians. And Dana Bash said, well, okay, yeah, but at least Israel isn't raping Palestinians.
The way Hamas was her implication.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like she's saying that Hamas is raping Israelis, but Israelis aren't raping Palestinians, which again, of course, is not true on two fronts. Like it's actually Israel that does rape Palestinians. And to date, there's no evidence of a single case of sexual assault by Hamas on October 7th. So Dana Bash was telling like a double lie in that one statement. And on top of that, even if it were true that Hamas was guilty of rape, Dana Bash was basically saying she doesn't care that, thousands of Palestinian civilians have been murdered. And so now here we have 6 hostages being killed. And all of a sudden she starts off the interview with like this huge expression of condolence and empathy, showing she only cares about Israeli Jewish lives, not Palestinian.
And can you imagine just reversing it a little bit, going back to that clip with Pramila Jayapal that you just brought up? Imagine if someone said something about dead Israelis and Dana Bash was like, okay, fine, but at least the Palestinians aren't targeting civilians in the numbers that we're seeing Israel targeting civilians. Like she'd be fired immediately.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. If she pointed out that the Israeli toll is a fraction of the Palestinian toll,
right.
Of course.
So you're only allowed to make disclaimers when you're justifying and legitimizing and whitewashing Israel, not the other way around, obviously. Okay.
We're like 10 seconds in this clip and already there's been so much to be outraged about. So I can't wait to hear how the rest of the clip goes.
Do you have any idea, and I realize this is early and obviously understandably very delicate, but do you have any idea based on when and where these individuals and their bodies were found that they were murdered after hearing or sensing that the IDF was close by?
Well, we will be able to put that information later, but I think that's not the question. Hamas is a terrorist organization that came to Israel, murdered thousands of people, and abducted these innocent civilian young people.
So notice, by the way, how he's totally not answering the question, right? She's asking whether or not he thinks that Hamas decided to kill these hostages because the IDF was approaching. And his response is how Hamas is a terrorist organization that killed people on October 7th. Okay.
Yeah, he even said that's not the question.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And
to be fair, he's honest about it. Yeah.
And she nods like, yep, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't even be asking. I shouldn't even answer that question.
She's. I'm surprised she doesn't. The only thing she doesn't do is like literally self-flagellate physically, but she does emotionally. Yeah.
And of course, he lies about the toll. He says Hamas came to Israel, killed thousands of people. No, the official toll is about 1,200, 800 or so civilians. The rest military and police. And again, we don't even know how many of those people Israel killed.
Right.
We do know Israel killed some of them because they used the Hannibal Directive. But anyway, even if Hamas had killed every single victim identified on October 7th, the official toll is about 1,200, which is not thousands. The correct verbiage there, the correct wording would be hundreds.
Of civilians, right.
Yeah. No, hundreds, period. Hundreds of people, period. It's like if you say if it's thousands, that means multiple thousands.
Multiple thousands, right. Yeah, it's not even over, right.
Yeah, and of course, you won't correct him for that either.
Of course not, yeah.
And they murdered them, and that is because they're a terrorist organization. I think I would not be the one looking for reasons for Hamas for why they did this.
No.
It's a terror organization killing innocent civilians. One of them, an American civilian, you all know of, that was killed brutally in this tunnel.
Yeah, and I just want to make no mistake about this. Hamas is a terror organization.
Thank you, Dan.
And they are the ones to blame for this. I guess the reason I was asking that question is whether or not they were close to being rescued. That was the basis for my question.
Yeah, the reason to ask the question, okay, is because, and of course, Dana Bash would never acknowledge this because I don't think her brain will allow her to think this way, but Israel could free all of the captives, all of them, if it just accepted the deal that's already been on the table. And in fact, they could have freed all of them before Israel had invaded, because before Israel invaded, Hamas said, we'll free all the captives if Israel pledges not to invade Gaza, which Israel obviously ignored. And then recently there was that rescue operation where Israel did free a few hostages, but killed hundreds of Palestinians in the process. And after that, Hamas says they've changed their policies to now allow them to kill captives if Israel is close to freeing them. So basically, Hamas is saying that we're not going to let Israel massacre hundreds of people and get away with rescuing captives. If it's going to go for these operations, then the captives are going to die, which underscores the need for a negotiated agreement to stop all the people being killed, whether it's Israeli or Palestinian. But of course, Dana Bash can't make those connections because she's in service of Israeli propaganda.
Right. Because this is all Hamas's fault and Israel has done nothing wrong whatsoever. But it's also interesting, note how he refuses, and so does Dana Bash, to see Hamas as rational actors. They're just terrorists and evil.
They're just terrorists. Yeah, exactly.
And who does that help? Does that actually doesn't save, again, we know these people don't care about Palestinian lives. That actually doesn't save the lives of the Israeli Jews who these people claim to care about, which is why you have hostage relatives saying you have to negotiate.
Yeah, but they don't care. They're just more
they don't care.
Concerned with killing Palestinians and destroying Gaza. So,
Lieutenant Colonel Shoshani, thank you so much for being here. And again, we are just devastated by the news.
So again, their pressure is just murdering, massacring, and actually provoking Hamas. Given what we now know about Hamas's decision, they are actually complicit in the killing of the hostages, of the captives. And again, she shows once again, in just as she does in the beginning, at the end of this, she shows so much sorrow and empathy that I think that's a good thing to have. I would just like it if she saw Palestinians as human beings also. And I just want to add that what's interesting is, again, not that Dana Bash brings this up, but you have hundreds of thousands of Israelis protesting because they want Netanyahu to actually negotiate. All
right. Well, for more reaction to the killing of these hostages, let's go to Adam Schiff. We haven't heard from him in a while. Best known for going on TV and lying through his teeth for years about having secret evidence of a Trump-Russia conspiracy. Well, let's hear his thoughts on the deaths of these hostages.
Are in Oakland, California right now. That is where the Goldberg Poland family is originally from. And I want to get your reaction to the murder of Israeli-American hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland and 5 others.
Well, when I heard the news last night, I felt sick. I am just absolutely heartbroken for Hirsch's family, for the families of these other hostages that were butchered by these Hamas terrorists. And it just is hard to wrap your head around. I think we all came to know Hirsch through his family, and it's just devastating. And these sons of bitches who did this ought to be hunted down and brought to justice, no matter how long that takes. I hope and pray, I think as we all do, that there's a negotiated end to this war, and soon, and that not another innocent person loses their life. And I just can't imagine how his family must feel right now.
Well, Adam Schiff with some tough talk there, these sons of bitches. And of course, he would never say that about the Israeli leaders that have massacred tens of thousands of Palestinians and are currently facing an indictment at the International Criminal Court, along with some leaders of Hamas. He would never use such language about them, and nor would he ever speak in such like emotional terms about all the people who in Gaza have been killed with U.S. weapons. It's just like the discrepancy. It's just incredible. Like all these tens of thousands of people who don't even have names. Like we never. There's no Palestinian equivalent of Hirsch. Like now in the U.S., everyone knows about Hirsch, who of
no
course,
Palestinian parents, no parents of Palestinian hostages were invited to speak at the DNC, obviously, because no Palestinians at all. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So the dehumanization is just, I've never seen anything like it. It's
so blatant.
It's so blatant. And they can get to go on TV and be emotional about these Israelis who all have a face, they all have a name, they all have families, but these tens of thousands of Palestinians, babies to the elderly, spanning the whole spectrum of human life. None of them have a name, none of them have a face, and none of them matter to these people.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that the Israeli population, hundreds of thousands of Israelis, are protesting precisely because they know that Netanyahu is responsible for the deaths of these hostages in some part. I mean, lots of them would blame Hamas too, but they also know that Netanyahu has not done everything he can to get these hostages freed, and they want negotiations. And of course, hostage families are also very, very vocal about this. And freed hostages have been yelling at Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu for not doing everything they can to free these hostages. And I just want to read a quote from Benny Gantz, who said about Netanyahu, he knew the hostages are living on borrowed time, that the sand in their hourglass was running out. The blood is on his hands without absolving Hamas of any responsibility. And by the way, for people who don't know who Benny Gantz is, he's an Israeli politician and a retired army general, and he was the Minister of Defense in 2020 and Deputy Prime Minister. So he's, again, not a peacenik.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's only the Biden administration and Netanyahu's like extremist of the extreme allies who are covering for Netanyahu anymore. But that's all he needs. Like, even the fact that he is like people in the Israeli leadership revolting against him and saying he's undermining a deal, he has the support of the U.S., so therefore he can continue not just massacring Palestinians, but also endangering the lives of the remaining Israeli hostages.
Right.